Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another live stream on Moving Home with Charlie. I'm Charlie. Customary slurp of tea to get started. It's been a long day. Oh, that's actually really nice. Let's get straight to the point. This morning, the Halifax put out their house price index and said that prices are rising across the board, month on month, quarterly, and yearly. Let's just get this up here. In January. Let's just go through what they say. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain what they say and why I don't agree with it, why it's confusing, and why it doesn't change what I'm saying, and just react to a couple of questions and comments I've had today. So let's just get this up on the screen. So here we are. According to the Halifax, and I'm going to read it here verbatim, average house prices, which is the first phrase with which I have a problem because I dispute that what they are reporting out, and I'm going to go and look deep into their methodology to show you. Average house prices rose by 1.3% in January, the fourth monthly rise in a row. Property prices grew 2.5% annually. And the typical UK home, another phrase that needs to be unpicked for you to understand its actual meaning in the context of you and your home and your move, now costs £291,000, over £3,700 more than last month. So one of the questions I'm going to ask in this video is, what is the typical UK home insofar as the lending indices? Consider it. The southeast of England continues to see the most downward pressure on house prices, yes, and it talks about some regional variations. And then it gives this Kim Kinnaird, who's always quoted every month, and the average house price in January. And my whole thesis here is that the number that they are quoting and the way that they calculate that number bears very little resemblance to house prices themselves because of how it is calculated. It is not any kind of average. That is a word they use to help people who don't understand how it's calculated understand it, but it is not an average of any kind. And he goes on to say, this is the fourth consecutive month that house prices have risen, and as a result, the pace of annual growth is now 2.5%, the highest rate since January last year. And he goes on, blah, 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 and there's some more stuff. And you can look at this, and I put a link to this below so you can go see it for yourself. Now, a lot of you who've been following my channel for a long time will have heard me go through this before, but I'm specifically doing this video because I've got a lot of new followers recently who haven't seen my previous talking about this and who've asked me questions today saying, Charlie, we'd love to hear your thoughts on what Halifax is announcing today. So apologies to those of you who've been watching me for a long time, have heard me say a lot of this before. But to all those of you who are new and are wondering how I can possibly think that house prices are going to be falling a nominal average 35% from peak to trough over 3 years or so, not a crash. I've never said it's a crash. And that we are only about halfway through that 3-year slide with another good 18 months to go on it. And how I think that the next 18 months will see sharper house price falls than we've seen this far. How on earth can I possibly stick to that expectation when the Halifax is putting out the fact that prices are rising month on month, quarterly, and yearly? It's a fair question, because why should we doubt it? Who have we got here this evening? Super Ted, hello there. Bilal, hi. Lynn Shepherd. Marcus Aurelius, hi there. Ian, stop watching. Ian says, please don't repeat the same stuff every time. It's dull as dishwater. Well, off you jog and watch something else. This isn't for people who've seen it before. This is for other people who haven't seen it. Kylo Hawk, who's new names. Yes, yeah, his channel is exploding with followers and he can't be that boring. Puddle, hello. That's a new name. Welcome. Carl Webster, hi there. And yes, Cats123, quite right. It is my channel and I can talk about whatever I like. And if you don't like it, you know what you can do. Take the following two words and rearrange them into a well-known phrasal sentence. Off, fuck. Sorry. And sorry about the slurping. Okay. Oh, it's so much more fun when I know you guys are here. It's nice to have you. Thank you. Now, let me get into the next part. I want to explain for people who don't know anything about how the house price indexes are calculated. But first of all, the one point everyone agrees on, right, is that all the house price indices say different things. The Halifax average says something different from the nationwide average. It says something different from Zoopla's average. It says something different from the land registry average. They all say different things. How can that be if they are accurate? Well, they are all using different data sets at different time points and different sample sizes, to say nothing of the fact that they are using some of them different methodologies. And I'm not... Mark says, looks like you just fell out of bed, Charlie. Did you end up in the Vino as well? No, I didn't. It's been a long day. I've been traveling a lot, so I apologize if I just fell out of bed. So the one thing everyone agrees on, I haven't heard anyone who disagrees with this, is that the house price indices create confusion. They are either very lagged or they don't reflect everything you expect. And for example, Halifax only uses mortgage-related transaction data from its own bank. Okay, not other people's, just its own. And I have also put a link below to the full ihsmarket.com methodology that really explains it. And I'm going to show you a bit of this in a minute to explain what I mean about how it's nothing to do with an average. Now, the land registry is the only house price index that offers us total transparency by releasing their full data set for anyone who wants, anyone at all, for free, can go to the land registry and can download the entire data set going back 25, 30 years. Okay. So you can just really, the point is, by offering that data set, there is transparency and their data claims can be verified, although they do not publish their precise house price index methodology. Now, the first thing you all need to know about all of the house price indices is what they all do is create their own version of what they call the typical property. And the typical property doesn't exist because the typical property is this weird melding of a studio flat and a detached house and a terraced house and a semi-detached house in Scotland and in Kent. And that's the typical property. Now, it must be incredibly difficult to come up with an agreement amongst the team about how do we define the typical property, and they all define it differently. And there is no agreed upon definition of a typical property that I know of. And so, first of all, you've got, this is the first place where there's a variation. So what is the definition of the typical property? Because you see it referred to in the house price index. You see Kim Kinnaird from Halifax saying the typical house price, or the price of the typical property. Okay. And so they are referring to an object which is fictional. And the price that they quote is the price of this fictional object. And what's really important is that you understand a tiny bit about the hoops that are jumped through to measure this stuff. Whew. Bear with me. This is, and I've linked to this below as well, this is the full house price index methodology explanation for the Halifax from, I think it was the 29th of March last year that they last updated this. And it's pages and pages and pages of description about how this is worked out, right? I'm just going to pick out a couple of quotes for you. Broadly speaking, the methodology was left unchanged since its inception in 1983. Is this on the screen? No, it's not. Wake up, Charlie. So this is the Halifax one. That's the first thing I wanted to point out to you. You can all go and read this, download it, look at it yourself, okay? And the other line I wanted to read to you, and then they've got monthly, quarterly, annual are all calculated very differently, okay? Index methodology, the sole source of the data for this is Lloyd's Banking Group, mortgage approval data, okay? So that means that it is excluding all cash transactions, and it's excluding all mortgage transactions with anyone who got a mortgage with anyone other than the Lloyd's Banking Group, okay? And they don't publish their sample size. They don't publish their data set. So there is no way to verify the sample size or the accuracy of any of their claims. We just have to take it on trust. And I'm not saying that this isn't trustworthy. My questions over this have nothing to do with trust. Are there questions about vested interest bias? Of course there are. And I'm not saying that I agree or I disagree with those. I'm just purely taking an objective, impartial view of what we actually have to work with here. The data set is then combined with hedonic regression techniques to generate house price indices, right? Blah, 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 blah. But the really key thing I wanted to start off with here, okay? Index calculation. The very first sentence in the very first paragraph on the index calculation says, the HHPI is calculated by estimating the price of a fixed basket, quote, of attributes of houses sold in different time periods. And by taking a ratio of two valuations, we subsequently estimate the change in property prices across a time period. Now, again, I'm not criticizing this and saying that they're doing it wrong or that they aren't doing it as per this, but we don't get to see the actual numbers that they use. Okay, but so first of all, there it is in black and white from the document that spells out how it's calculated. It is calculated by estimating the price of a fixed basket of attributes of this typical property that doesn't exist. Blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on and on. And let's just keep on going because the other bit I wanted to point out to you is this. I love this quote here. Given that successive years of data are not directly comparable, there you are, okay. Bloody, 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 blah. And I want to get to, here we are, here we go. Here's the good stuff. Here's the juice. The difficulty is the implicit value placed by a purchaser on each characteristic cannot be observed because transactions take place in terms of a single total price. Correct. Can't be observed. Therefore, in order to remove that part of price variation due to the changes in the mix of house characteristics over time, and so to measure the variation caused by inflationary factors, it is necessary to disaggregate prices into their constituents statistically. This is achieved by using, are you ready for it? A multivariate regression equation of the form, and I will just leave you to actually behold the joy of this on your own. Okay, there it is. Yeah. Behold the joy. That is not an average. And it goes on to explain the mathematical average. And you think, okay, well, hang on, Charlie, they're actually giving us the maths, so we can do the maths and we can check it. Well, we could, absolutely, we could, if they gave us the actual input numbers. For example, okay, the number of properties in there, we don't know what they are. The characteristics of the properties, we don't know what they are because they don't publish them. All right. And the internal floor area bounded between 30 and 500 square meters. There are plenty of properties with smaller than 35. There are so many assumptions and parameters and it goes on, right? Okay, do you see what I'm saying? Regression coefficients, qualitative and quantitative characteristics, unmeasured factors assumed to be randomly distributed. This is an assumption. And I could go on and on and on. And I urge you all, if you genuinely want to understand why I do not take these indices as useful or helpful when trying to determine what's happening to house prices, Have a read of this document. The link is below. All right. Now, so that there is no transparency. And so the house price index, that they call it, is nothing more than an unsubstantiated press release. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't have a complaint about it. Nationwide is the same. But they put disclaimers in there saying, by the way, we can change this whenever we like. We often make revisions that we don't tell you about. And we can change it without telling you that we've changed it. So in terms of actual transparency of how it's calculated, there is zero. None. Zip. Nada. Zero transparency. We are to take it on trust that their calculations are accurate. Again, I am not questioning any malicious intent or any vested interest. I'm not saying that there is or isn't any of that. I'm leaving that out of this discussion. I'm purely looking at the published information that we have to go on. Because what you've got is a lot of people going, oh, well, this is data. No. This is a number in a press release that cannot be verified. That is a true statement of fact. It is a number, the price, the 291,000 price that they quote, is a number in a press release that we can't check. We can check the land registry's numbers because they publish the entire data set. We can't check these numbers. We can't check the nationwide numbers. We can't check Zupa's numbers. And we can't check Rightmove's numbers. And that is why I am proposing the creation of an open source house price index where every single data point can be verified. Okay, where exchange prices and rental prices are provided by people who want to provide them. And if we get enough in any given month, and enough in my view is as long as it's the same as the land registry, then that's definitely credible, then we have a valid alternative measure of house prices, where not only is the full data set available, just like the land registries, but also the calculation method of anything we publish will also be published, the actual calculation method, which none of the other indices actually reveal. So that is why. So all right. So Charlie, what do you think's happening that means that this house price index is becoming less accurate? Well, I think that the mix changes. And by the way, I've got a quote here from Richard Donnell, who is not only the Zoopla research director, but he's the guy who actually designed and built the Zoopla house price index. And he's been on this channel a couple of times. And this is a conversation he was having with one of my followers, Santiago, back in June last year, when he said, in answer to Santiago, who asked a question, it will be down to their mix of lending. So they're talking about nationwide. Yeah, nationwide. Down to their mix of lending, which nobody knows, that drives the input data to their house price index. They are circa 5% market share, I believe. So this, again, 5% market share, and let's assume that's 5% of the whole market, not just the mortgage market, because that would be really tiny. The nationwide house price index represents, or doesn't represent, 95% of transactions. And nobody knows that when they read the headline that house prices have done this. What they should say is 5% of house prices, only based on mortgage transactions, have done this according to their calculation methodology. But Richard goes on to say, this reinforces the point that a positive bias in their index over the last 24 months may be unwinding more now. And here is the golden phrase I want everyone to understand. Index bias can shift. I'm trying to highlight that and I can't highlight on the screen. Index bias, and if you only remember one thing from this video, please. In fact, I'm going to change the title of the video to Index Bias Can Shift. I'd like you all to remember that, especially those of you who are telling me, but Charlie, Halifax and Nationwide, this is data. It's data. No, it's unverified press release. That is all it is. Land registry's data. This is unverified press release, and they all contain a bias of some kind. They all do. Okay? Now, what we do know is that the Bank of England has shown us, with Bank of England's mortgage approvals data, which is for all mortgages, that there's been a sharp reduction in the number of mortgaged transactions, especially at the lower end of prices. And this is something that I didn't when I initially, in summer 2022, set out my position that house prices are going to collapse, and my 8 reasons why. I had zero expectation or understanding of what has now happened, which is, and this is what's skewing things slightly, is the downsizing effect. This, which there's increasing evidence of this real effect of the people selling a large property, paying off their mortgage, and using the cash balance that they've made to buy a smaller property for cash, which has created two things that I didn't expect. Faster house price falls at the higher end, and smaller house price falls at the lower end, which has also been evidenced by Rightmove's asking price index, where exactly that's happening. The house price falls above 600,000 are much bigger than house price falls below. And of course, there are regional variations as well. The regional variations I did expect and are happening. But to the people who are saying, but Charlie, you said house prices are going to fall 35%. I still think that, by the way. I still think that. And we won't know until sometime in 2026 when we start to see the actual prices being reported by the land registry. Okay. That doesn't mean all house prices are going to fall that much. I've always said that there'll be regional variations of between minus 15%, so total falls, nominal falls from peak to trough will be minus 15% over those 3 years or so from peak to trough. And in other areas, those falls will be up to 50% nominal falls, is my expectation. Those are the regional variations. Now, take one town we've got some data for, Merthyr Tydfil in Wales. A mortgage company begins with P's name, I can't remember. They published data that shows that Merthyr Tydfil house prices have come down 20% already. So, unfortunately, for people who own houses in Merthyr Tydfil, they're seeing very sharp house price falls, and there is a lot further to go. So that might be an area that when we get to the bottom a couple of years from now, because I think the economic outlook is so much worse than most people, if I'm right about the economic outlook, and if I'm right about the effect that will have on house prices, that will drag house prices in the worst affected areas down by, I think, 50% peak to trough nominal. Okay, I know that sounds horrific for people who own houses, and it sounds exciting for people who don't own houses, but that's what I think. And in the other areas, so the 15% areas, well, so far, those areas actually may not yet have seen house price falls. There are areas where, because of relocating from south to north, there's a definite trend of people moving from the south to the north to get better value for money for a home to bring up a family. And so there are areas in the northwest that have not seen any house price falls yet. Do I think they're still going to? Yeah, I do. I still think they are going to see them. Could I be wrong? Absolutely. Could I be wrong? Yeah, definitely. So if you bear in mind the two things about my 35% number, which is regional variations, three things. Regional variations. Number two, the time scale that I've talked about. And number three, the extra factor that I didn't expect and foresee, which is the downsizing effect. What you've got to ask yourself is, well, how do each of those three things affect me? Where in the country am I? Am I in the south or am I in the north? Where in the price range am I? Am I at the top end of the price range or bottom? Am I 600-700 grand and above, or am I 200 grand and below? Okay, because that will vary it. And I can't remember the third one now. But you hear what I'm saying. So there are some people who've got very upset about this. I don't understand why it's upset, because I'm just a random bloke on the internet. You shouldn't listen to anything I say. Don't listen to anything I say. If there are people who have heard me say that I think house prices are going to fall an average of 35% peak to trough over 3 years, and you are waiting because I've said that, well, don't. And I've never said wait. I've always said, if you need a house and can buy now, don't wait, as long as you don't overpay, because you might get into negative equity. That's what I've always said. I have never said there's going to be a house price crash, and I'm not saying there's going to be a house price crash. I do think there are going to be very large house price falls in some areas. And the reason I'm explaining this is because I have a lot of new followers who haven't heard all of this, and you need to bear in mind all of this stuff. Okay. Because to some of you who are waiting for house price falls, you might be going, "What? Where are these house price falls? Where are they? Where are they?" And if you are in the wrong area and the wrong end of the housing market, and you've got a whole lot of downsides, and you're a first time buyer and you're up against it, you're going, "I can't see any house price falls." There are places in the UK where, at certain areas of the market, there's a lot of competition for the property, and the house prices aren't falling there yet. I still think they're going to, but if you need a home, you shouldn't wait, because you might as well be paying a mortgage rather than rent anyway. If you work out how much it would cost you I mean, if you're living with parents or you're living somewhere you're lucky enough not to have to pay any rent, then yeah, I don't think there's any hurry at all if you're comfortable. But I had I want to make sure I've covered all the points I wanted to cover. Now, do I have any questions on this topic? Questions on this topic, please, guys. Bum, ba, bum, ba, bum. Yeah, okay. Andis makes a very good point. Thank you very much, Andis. He says, taking into account the latest Halifax optimistic statement, will this lead to stickier house prices due to sellers unwilling to reduce? This is the point. If I was an estate agent, then if I was an estate agent in an area where house prices are actually rising, you haven't got any problems, everything's fine, your market's great, happy days. But if I was an estate agent in an area where house prices are not rising, as they've said in the Halifax index, I'd be tearing my hair out and going, this isn't helping. I need my sellers to get more realistic. I do one-to-one video calls. You can book a half an hour or 1 hour slot with me on my website. And I had one today with a lady who is about to buy. She sold last year. Now, she said to me that she put out, it was her first home she'd ever bought. It was a brand new build. And she decided she wanted to move out for a number of reasons, personal and everything else. She wanted to be out of the house. She went to 2 estate agents, only 2. She hadn't seen my channel at this point. And both agents valued it at £350,000. And so she went, okay, let's put it on £350,000. 2 months later, not a sausage, not a dicky bird, hardly any viewings, no offers. She then discovered my channel in September last year. And so nice to hear when this happens. She totally understood my point about price below expectations, get competing bids. And she went to her agent and said, right, I would like to drop the price from 350 down to 300,000, please. And they were like, oh, what? No. I said, well, it's not selling. And I want to try Charlie's. And within a week, she'd had 8 viewings and 5 offers and sold it for £320,000. So you tell me how the Halifax pumping out these numbers is helping anyone. Is it putting confidence back in the market? No, because any buyer worth their salt is out there looking at house prices going, where is this place? Where is this typical house? Where is this place that typical prices are rising? Because I can't afford those prices because the mortgage interest rate's gone up so much. So I actually think that the only effect this is going to have is to reduce house transactions further as more and more sellers hold on and don't want to drop their price because, well, Halifax house prices are rising. So if we wait, then house prices are going to come up and beat us. And this is where there's a fatal mistake. And this is why these indices are causing so much harm to those people waiting to sell, thinking prices are coming up to rise. It's not helping the sellers. It's not helping the buyers. It's not helping the agents. Now, is Halifax doing this on purpose? No, I don't think they are. I think this is the number that when they punch the numbers into their model, this is the number that comes out. But it is not successfully adjusting for the very sharp changes in the profile of transactions that are happening. And therefore, if you take a rough average and you have fewer transactions at the bottom and more at the top, the average increases. And there are some people who say, but hedonic regression adjusts for that. Well, if only we could check. If only they published their actual numbers, then we could check. But I don't think it does. And as Richard Donald from Zoopla said, no, every index has a bias. They all have bias, and it depends on their mix adjustment. And those mix adjustments are basically humans going, turn that dial up a bit, turn the dial down a bit. How many square feet are we saying? How many price per square foot are we saying? How many bedrooms are we saying on average? Okay, all right, twiddle. There is no magical formula that will accurately adjust for everything that's happening in the housing market. And also, the Halifax has a northern bias, and the nationwide has a southern price bias. And they are diverging at the moment, which is yet another factor to take into account. Samsung New Life says maybe all indexes are off, but they can't be by much. Historically, they were fairly accurate. How do you know? When you say that historically they were fairly accurate. That's an assumption that we have no way of knowing if they were or not. Now, what I do accept is that when everything is fairly stable and the number of transactions is remaining fairly uniform and people's moving patterns are fairly uniform and all of the moving patterns are fairly stable, then yes, I do think these indices are a fairly good reflection of what's happening and a reasonably reliable one of what's happening. Because there's no point having them otherwise. But we are not in any way, shape, or form in an ordinary housing market at the moment. Jose Libero says, I'm shocked by how this is being covered in the BBC and the Guardian. I expect a better standard of journalism, but looks like their haters might have a point. Yes, Leo, sorry, it's an impromptu live. Sharpie asks a fair question. If average house price percentages are pointless because of different property types, then why did you yourself make an average house price percentage prediction? That's a good point. And I mean, I don't know how else to convey what my overall expectation of the market is in terms that are easy to understand. But you see, what I haven't done is I haven't applied any hedonic regressions or mixed adjustment methodology or any of that stuff. So I'm just talking about roughly what I'm expecting for people's expectations of their own house prices to do. That's what I'm saying. Sean Watts says, hi, Charlie, data scientist here. If they are using such a regression that predicts based on house characteristics, then larger, high-end properties being moved more than low-end would skew it. Thank you, Sean. Welcome. That's a new name on the channel. Anyone have any response to what Sean's saying? Anyone want to challenge Sean? I love it when a user has a real name and a photograph and you know that the real person is not hiding behind anonymity. And by the way, guys, honestly, I'm not even... if I have a criticism of these house price indices, it's the commentary that goes with it. That's my criticism, the commentary that goes with it. Samsung New Life says, fair point, Charlie, on the mix. Well, okay, do I have a bias? I'm trying to think of this. If I was an opponent of mine and I was trying to see what is my bias. So some people think that I'm biased because I want to be right. Because I've said I think that house prices are going to slide 35% over a few years and peak to trough. That now that I've said that, I'm biased because I want that to be true. I don't know how to counteract that other than to say, my objective is to make moving home more easy. My objective is to help people who need to move home, to reduce transaction times, to increase transaction numbers, to improve market liquidity, so that social mobility can improve. I personally am losing as house prices fall. There you are. So why would I have a bias to want house prices to fall? If I was driven purely by needing to be right, then yes, then you could argue that I have a bias. But for anyone who's watched me long enough, you'll know that I don't care about being wrong. I mean, being wrong is when you learn. I'm very happy to be wrong, and I'll put my hands up when I am wrong. So, am I biased? Yeah, maybe there's a small amount of that, but you know, for the people whose lives are going to be adversely affected by massive house price falls, I don't want that. That's not what I want for you guys. You know, and I worry about the people who are absolutely buying the Halifax and the Nationwide and the headlines and believing that the house prices aren't falling, who are going to get such a fucking rude shock when they try and move or sell. Yeah, Cats 23 says, they are only anecdotes, but I get a lot of them. And it's this: most right move alerts I receive are reduced ones. I get about 10 a day. And that property log that tracks them says that they have got record numbers of reductions happening. That doesn't happen. You don't get record numbers of price reductions if house prices are going up. You just don't. You don't need to be an advanced mathematician to do that. I only did A-level statistics and pure maths. That's I'm not a PhD mathematician. But I've been working with software coders and large data sets for my entire career, and that was my mathematical background. I have enough to have a basic understanding of what's going on. Do you think Clueless Crypto asks a good question. Do you think people en masse comparing rent versus buy and seeing that buy looks significantly better could be a reason your expectations could be off? Well, no, because if that was the case, I mean, that's a sensible theory to ask. Then we'd see increases in first-time buyer numbers, wouldn't we? But we can see verifiable decreases in first-time buyer numbers. I do think that downsizing. Alex pulled out of the Bank of England data this huge amount of down paying of mortgages, which can only be explained by people selling houses, paying off those mortgages, downsizing, and buying cash. Clueless Crypto says, seeing a flow of much better prices compared to summer 2022 in the southeast. More choice, agents saying lots of viewings but no offers. Yeah, Gavin Lawrence makes a good point. The indices are one tool in your toolbox. Yep, I agree. I think the most useful thing that you can look at the indices is the regional variations within the indices. That is one of the tools you should be looking at when you're moving. In most places at the front line, you can see house prices are down significantly, at least 10%, 15, 20. There are places where it's 20, but just trying to find more questions. Simon Cunningham says, Charlie, you say we won't know about until 2026 from land registry about the falls, but what makes you think you'll trust their numbers by then? Only that I'm not saying that the index necessarily, but they will publish you can look up every single transaction. So every single transaction with the address, so you can look up the prices and we can see exactly what the actual raw data prices are. And so we can do simple, plain old, we haven't got to worry about, we can get flats, we can get terraced houses, we can get semi-detached houses, we can get detached houses in regions, and we can compare the same properties from 3 years ago with that at the time. You see what I mean? So the raw data will be available to make a plain and simple mathematical calculation without having to worry about hedonically regressed fantasy typical properties, if that makes sense. Nick Thorne says, house price falls only happen with forced sellers. Discuss. Okay, so we're seeing a rise in forced sellers happening with mortgage defaults happening and landlords. I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet. This is just my opinion. There are going to be a lot more forced sellers in the next couple of years. There was one of the comments, sorry. Yeah, Night Hunter says, I've noticed houses selling quick in Manchester. I was looking and saved a lot of properties on my list and they have sold within days. Yes. So I've heard from multiple sources that properties in Manchester are selling quickly, and Manchester is definitely outperforming in terms of house prices and transactions most of the rest of the market, especially South Manchester, where people can get to London easily. South Manchester is doing much better than North, but the centre's doing very well. Do, 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 do. Cats123 says, do you think there's going to be an influx of properties in the market in the spring? I don't know. I don't know when we're going to see it, because I think what's different between this downturn and the last one is that the last time round there weren't nearly as many people on fixed rate mortgages as there are this time round, and we've still got quite a long way to go until all the people on low fixed rates come to the end, and so that has created a real slowdown and spreading effect of the impact of interest rates and mortgage prices. I think there is going to be a tipping point at some point, and it might be because of a particularly bad piece of economic data, although we're not going to hear any more jobs data from the government until September, according to the ONS, apparently. So, I mean, it does feel like they're doing their very level best to try and keep a lid on negative data. But if enough negative economic data comes out, there might be something that spooks everybody, and there might be a rush. I do think that's going to happen at some point. Whether it's the spring or not, I don't know. Aaron Hughes says, I'm seeing cheaper stuff in the southwest that aren't selling, flats on a 200 grand. Yeah. Oh, wicked. Night Hunter said, I did everything you mentioned about being search pack ready and solicitor ready, and it was a walk in the park. Brilliant. I've had a few people message me today saying that they are now in their dream home that they never imagined possible because of my suggested approach to it. Also buyers and sellers. And yesterday, so I've got a bit of updated advice that I would add in for buyers who are out viewing and making offers, which is this. Well, I had yesterday, my one-to-one call, someone booked a whole hour with me, and they've been viewing and viewing and viewing and viewing, and they were showing me links of the stuff that they've been viewing and what they want to offer on and that kind of stuff. And I was looking at some of these properties, and this was in Manchester. I was looking at some of these properties, and I started to realize some of these properties, the sellers are not serious. There's just clearly no serious intention to actually sell. And you can quite clearly tell the ones that were from the ones that weren't. And I found myself saying to him, make sure before you go and view a property, ask the agent, is the seller for that property contract ready? And if not, how soon can they be contract ready? Okay. I would ask, if I was a buyer, I would be asking that question on any property before viewing it. Is that property contract ready? If not, why not? You'll find most of them aren't. And if they aren't contract ready, how soon can they be contract ready? And do not allow the estate agent to give you a guess. Oh, well, a few weeks should be fine. So no, I want a firm answer. I want to know, have they got the conveyancer? Have they begun that process yet? What stage are they at in the process? I need to know, because I'm a buyer and I don't want to be waiting 6 months for them to move out because they can't find anywhere because they don't actually want to sell. There are so many time-wasting sellers out there. And if you are a genuine buyer trying to find a home because you really want to buy and move in, those sellers are wasting your time. And I've never seen so many instances of that clearly being the case. And it was very obvious because the questions that they'd asked the agent, they didn't have answers to those questions. Like, these sellers aren't serious. You can see the sellers that are serious. And so the way to find out if a seller is serious before you view a property is to say, could you tell me, please, is that seller contract ready? And if not, how soon will they be contract ready? I need an answer to that before I can view or make an offer. Yeah, there are a lot of time wasting sellers out there. Okay, guys, sorry, this has turned into a much. Oh, this is a good one. Okay, so Daisy Changes Buttercup says, what is the quickest turnaround in selling a property if all parties are ready? If the seller is contract ready, if the buyer is cash and chooses not to have a survey, you can exchange in 48 hours. Literally, if the seller's contract ready. And being contract ready means having everything that you need to do anyway in order to sell done. All the questions answered, all the paperwork filled out, all the documents provided, everything, so that the conveyancer can say, we are ready to exchange contracts. We are contract ready. And if you find a cash buyer, you can exchange in 7 days if there are no problems. And if it's a mortgage buyer, it'll be as quickly as it takes for the property search pack results to come back and for the mortgage lender to do their lender. That's how fast it can be. So if you're a first-time buyer and the seller is contract ready, and you buy your search pack immediately, and you're in an area where there aren't undue delays from the local authority on the search pack results, and if the lender gets their valuation survey done quickly enough, you could be saying, I want to go for a 2-week exchange and a 4-week completion. Right, guys. I hope that's helpful. Are there any more questions in relation to Halifax's house price index today? I want to take this question from Harry Rich. Seller question. Hi, Charlie. Planning on selling this year. However, worried about negative speculation for next year's pricing. Needing to move, but is it wise? If you need to move, I'm not quite sure what you mean about negative speculation for next year's pricing. If you need to move, you say you're planning on selling this year. If you're upsizing, and where you're upsizing to is going to be affected the same as where you live now, you don't have. There's no time pressure on you because they should do the same, right? So your price differential may even improve. If you're downsizing, you need to move as fast as you can. If you're moving sideways, again, the variation shouldn't change. But if you're selling because you need to sell for financial reasons, I would not wait. I would not wait. Any more great questions? Gavin Lawrence says, when you say house prices, are you talking about sold house prices? Yes, absolutely. And that's why the best agent open source house price index will be exchange prices. So actual prices paid, hopefully at least 3 months sooner than the land registry gets them, let alone reports them. Daisy Chains to Buttercup says, solicitors have told me minimum 6 weeks to sell. You need to say to your solicitors, I would like to be contract ready. What do I need to do? And if they faff about and say 6 weeks, then you need to change solicitors. Right, no more questions, guys. I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you for watching. I just want to go back and finish the video for all of you who weren't here to start with this phrase here. So this is a tweet from the individual who designed and built the Zoopla house price index. And he says, index bias can shift, right? Their mix of lending, because each index has its own mix of lending that drives the input data to their HPI. And we don't ever see the input data, which is why they are not transparent. This reinforces the positive bias in their index of the last 24 months, maybe unwinding more now. Okay, so it is not the case that house price indices are accurate. They are estimates. I really enjoy these one-to-one videos, guys. So those of you who want my advice and my help with your moves, you can book them at mhwc.co.uk, where you can also talk to my conveyancers, talk to my mortgage brokers, get your search pack ready if you're buying as well. And I'm just going to shut up because I'm babbling now. Thank you very much. It's been a long day. I'm tired. Have a lovely evening. See you soon. Talk to you on the next one. Bye-bye, guys.